In 2005, the Carter-Baker Commission thoroughly examined flaws in America's election system. Unfortunately, those findings were ignored in 2020.
Carter-Baker Commission also concluded that one of the most serious sources of voter fraud are mail-in ballots, absentee ballots, that if you want to prevent voter fraud, you want to carefully limit when mail-in and absentee ballots are allowed. What did Zuckerberg do? It came in and pressured these governmental entities to do mail-in ballots, or even worse, these drop boxes, which was a new innovation for COVID, that is a rampant invitation to fraud.
A rampant invitation to cheating, a rampant invitation to buying an election. Russ, I want to skip the next video, so we're not going to do that one. I want to take the one after that in just a second. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about millions and millions of dollars. We're talking about a bait and switch of historic proportion taking place. We're talking about grants being given out to turn out Democrat voters. You can find out more about this. Again, you can get the whole story by going to rig2020.com and picking up a copy of the film for $4.99. It's the best deal you'll ever get. rig2020.com. So you might be saying, well, gosh, how in the world were they able to do this? Didn't they have to give the grants to both sides? Didn't they have to give the grants to Republicans and Democrats? Well, yeah, they were supposed to, but as is so often the case, reality didn't reflect, what they had told us it would. Let's take the next clip.
When Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry learned his state was receiving private money to help run elections, he immediately launched an investigation.
What we found in the first week of our investigation was that there were parishes in Louisiana that seemed to have been targeted, right? And those parishes were mostly Democratic parishes. And so they were basically bypassing or just kind of glossing over the more rural areas of the state and looking to hone their money into the more urbanized or democratically concentrated parishes.
While the grants were open to jurisdictions on a nonpartisan basis in accordance with the law, key Democrat areas apparently received advance notice.
Oh, imagine that. Key Democrat areas received advance notice. Russ, we're going to go to the next clip pretty quickly. Louisiana was not the only state. Remember how important Georgia was? Remember, at times, the entire election was pinned on Georgia? Well, let's look at what happened there. Take that clip.
I've never seen anything like this. Georgia seems to have always been a place where elections have been fair and honest and upright. And all of a sudden, this past one, everything seemed to be a huge question mark. There was an enormous amount of money thrown into this race, and I believe that helped influence the outcome.
$45 million was spent in Georgia alone, and we showed that actually moved the needle anywhere from 2 to 3%, and that would have made the difference in Georgia in the outcome.
In my mind, they were clearly rigging the election. I'm not convinced that the election was stolen on Election Day. I think the bigger story was that across the whole country for months, there was an effort to rig the election to make it virtually impossible for Trump to win.
If I were a political operative and I told you, a candidate, I can shift you big counties by 13.5 points, you couldn't write checks fast enough to me.
And we're finding out what they did. There were communications with key election officials, and one of those election officials is the Secretary of State of Georgia, whose goal in life appeared to be to make himself adored by the left.
The Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for everything you and your colleagues are doing. We are so grateful to see democracy in action in Georgia.
And he was totally afraid of Stacey Abrams. So the money that flowed into Georgia, a lot of it came through the Secretary of State's office.
The consent decree was an agreement pushed by Democrats and failed gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, and signed off on by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. The agreement undercut the process for matching signatures on absentee ballots.
Imagine that. Undercut the process for matching signatures on absentee ballots.